Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gourash. I am here with Bobby Scales II, standing in for endlessly vacationing, very tan and handsome beat writer Evan Petzold, who is still in Greece. There's a possibility he may cover next season from Mykonos. We'll have to find out later. Bobby, how you doing? That's been a long season. Didn't end the way we wanted, but it was a lot of fun, huh?
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, a lot of fun. It was a roller coaster ride. It was red hot and at the very end, but it was a lot of fun. Anytime, you get an opportunity to be close to a Major League Baseball team in the capacity that I was for so long, it's fun. It was wonderful to see Comerica come alive late. That's Detroit right there. What you saw, the ballpark full, people going bananas, cheering their team. Obviously, you're kind of riding a little bit on the coattails of the success across the street at Ford Field and the Lions, and they've got a great thing going. So it was good. It was good to pull on the rope a little bit of Detroit, having some good vibes.
Didn't end the way we liked, but you defeated Houston, had Cleveland on the ropes. I think the big game, really, at the end of the day, was David Fry's swing off Brisky, game 4. I think you were 4 or 5 outs away from moving on. And a lot of people are disappointed, but, I'm going to tip my hat to the Cleveland Indians. They were on the verge of elimination, and it wasn't like they were 2 meatballs that they clobbered to win game 4 and game 5. I mean, Brisky's pitch was borderline bottom rail. Fry hit it a mile.
Yeah.
And then Thomas, noted first ball swinger, but at the same time, it wasn't like that was middle meatball either. And sometimes you just got to tip your hat when guys in the major leagues put a good swing. I mean, both those pitches were over 97 miles an hour. It wasn't like, they were 93 center cut either. So, Cleveland
right.
took themselves from the brink of elimination and won 2 baseball games. It wasn't like the Tigers gave them away either. So I feel good about that. And I acknowledge the fact that sometimes good baseball teams do good things to win baseball games. And Cleveland has done that. Their bullpen may be toasted against the Yankees here now, but we're gonna find that out, I think. But at the same time, I tip my hat to the Detroit Tigers, and I think they've set a standard now. It'll be very interesting to see moving forward. It's one thing to be the underdog and the Cinderella. It's another thing to be the hunted. I think the Lions have done in football a great job of transitioning from that to being the hunted. We will find out if the Detroit Tigers, when expectations are much higher, are able to navigate that. And that's a whole different way of playing every day. So, I mean, you've done this. Give me some thoughts on that.
No, I think I agree with everything you said. I think it's very accurate. And you're right. You now have to shift the focus. You're not the cute store anymore. You're not, quote unquote, Cinderella. People are going to be looking, hey, listen, Detroit's coming to town. These guys are ready. These guys made a playoff, made the playoffs a year ago being obviously this year. And they won a series and very well could have been in the league championship series. And you're right. Cleveland I think overall, Cleveland was probably a little bit better team and they won the series. No big deal. You can deal with that. But, and I think if I'm not mistaken, AJ said this yesterday at a press conference. I'm not sure if it was AJ or Scott, but now the floor is set. 2024 is the floor. That's the expectation moving forward. And I have a lot of, not hopeful. Hopeful is not the word. I have a lot of confidence in this group because AJ's seen it. He's seen it firsthand. He's been with a club that was at this stage. They had to break through and they had to figure this out. They got their nose bloodied, but then this type of performance and this type of record and standard as far as play on the field in all forms now becomes the expectation. And it was funny. He's had a casual conversation with him, and this isn't earth shattering, but when he was at this point with his Astros clubs, he would call people who have been there. He would call coaches in different sports that have been in this situation. Okay, this is where we are now. How do you get to the next stage? And even after he won a World Series with those guys down there, he made the same phone calls to the same people who had been at that stage again. Hey, this is where we are now. How do you run it back? How do you do this? How do you maintain this standard? And obviously the sport cultures are different between football and basketball and college basketball. I know he reached out to some college basketball coaches and he reached out to some, professional football coaches too, or head coaches as well, to find out how you do that. Well, here's the thing. He's been there. He knows how to do that. Obviously, this is a different situation in a different city with a different franchise. But the principles of sound leadership in these situations don't change. So he's going to have a very clear vision of what needs to happen next. One, to keep the culture and the standard of himself, of his coaches, of these players, of the entire organization, and in the right frame of mind to move forward. But also too, with Scott Harris, understanding what needs to happen at that level. I think there's a very clear picture. I think this is a really great start to the next era of Tiger baseball.
I think the most comforting thing to me as both a fan and a pseudo baseball analyst is that A.J. Hinch is, to me, driving the bus. I mean, he knows how to do this. He's done it before. He has a clear vision of how he'll do it this time. No two teams are the same, but he knows how to get there. He knows what's needed. He knows how to handle people. And I think all those things are evident, but it's very comforting. He's not driving into the unknown here. He has a very clear idea of how to accomplish what everybody is expecting and hoping they can accomplish. But more than anything, A.J. Hinch is expecting to accomplish it. So they have very steady leadership at the top, both on in-game things, in clubhouse things. And, culture is a often used word in sports about teams, but the culture of the Detroit Tigers was obviously a huge benefit to this season, but that culture was very carefully and crafted by A.J. Hinch. And you've been in locker rooms, for a large part of your life. Talk a little bit about that and how important and how nuanced it is when somebody can do something like, set the standard and create the culture that A.J. did.
Yeah, listen, that's one of those things where culture, so it's so funny and it's such a buzzword. It's like a corporate America buzzword, but it's so true. You know it when you see it, and you know it when you feel it, and you know it when you're immersed in it, and even when you're kind of, I guess you want to call it, adjacent to it, like I was for this year, you feel it, right? And the key to culture is understanding that it's a living, breathing organism. Every single day you're in it and around it, and that has to be nurtured and cared for and cultivated every single day. I was at a leadership conference. Gosh, this has probably been 7-8 years ago now, over in London with a group out of London called Leaders in Sports. They do a great job. They bring in leaders of all sport worldwide, whether it's English Rugby Federation, soccer teams all over the world, whatever. And Matt Painter, of all people, was over there, Purdue head coach. And he was like, your culture is right when you walk around the building and you hear people saying stuff that they're essentially selling your message all the time. And that's where I believe this Tiger culture is now, that A.J. Hinch has brought this winning culture, the standard being higher than it once was, back to Detroit. You can hear guys saying things that came right from A.J. When you're having conversations with other people, when you're on the bus having conversations with, just going to the stadium, when you're talking to, whether it be Keith Beauregard, one of the hitting coaches, or Michael Bedard, or whoever, when you hear them saying certain things, it's coming right from A.J. And so the culture is strong. And then that filters down to the players. If it's important to the coaches, if it's important to the coaching staff, if it's important to the organization, then it becomes important to the players. And then the thing that nurtures it the more than anything else is the level of communication that all of these coaches, including AJ, have with each one of the players. It's each one of the staff members. This is how the culture spreads. This is what we do. This is how we go about it. This is the standard, and the standard is the standard. Anything less than that is unacceptable. And that's where the Tigers are now. And this standard of baseball and the standard of playing the game is just part of the fabric of who they are.
I think what you're describing is not just a baseball team. It's any successful company, organization, in any business. So it's good to know that that's
100%,
where they are.
100%.
That's where they are, and it makes things sustainable. I mean, people understand the expectations going in. The style of play may change, but a lot of the culture is not going to change, or at least the expectation of how to execute that. So, all right, let's jump into the big two. Question one of the big two: how will last season and the playoff run impact 2025? A lot, not a lot? What's your thoughts on that?
Both. And that's not me sitting on the fence. I think it's both. I think you have to take these lessons. For me, when you're looking back at an off season, and this is not just because the Tigers got to within one game of the American League Championship Series. When you look back at off season, you have to look back at the good, the not so good, the areas that you need to improve upon. All of those things. You have to be very critical. You have to be able to celebrate the things you did well and understand the things that you didn't do so well, and then formulate a plan on how you got better. So all of these players will be better for their experience they had because they felt something in their body having to execute things at a high level with constraints, crowd, tension, just things that they have never, ever felt before outside of Matt Vrilling. They've never felt before. You can't help but be a better professional baseball player. You can't help but be a better professional coach if you haven't gone through it than after that, because you've had that experience. You can't, there's nothing you can do in your life that's going to simulate that level of stress, that level of anxiety that you have when you're in those moments. That said, you already got paid for that. Now it's time to move on. How are we going to get better? Nobody cares, and no one's going to care on April 1st next year, whenever they open, March, whenever they open. The Tigers got to the playoffs in 24 because 25 is upon us. And so it's both of those things.
Do you know one of the weirdest things is, looking at really good teams, it's rare that, teams that accomplish as much as the Tigers did this year don't have multiple players that have years that maybe they're never going to be able to duplicate again. And when I look at this team, aside from Tarek Skubal, there was nobody on the roster that had a season that you don't think there's room for improvement going into 2025 and years forward. Not one single player besides Scoobs. So it makes it kind of interesting because the sum of the parts obviously accomplished a lot more than they did in many respects individually. So it leaves, when you talk about floor and ceiling, there's a lot more room for improvement in this team. That's a scary part. Doesn't mean they're going to win, or get further, but they do have the capacity to be a lot better. So it should be
agree. I totally agree. Look at, even Riley Green. Riley had a great year. It was an 827 OPS. I can absolutely see him being better than that next year. There's go up and down this lineup. Truly, there's, like you said, there's a lot of guys with room for improvement and areas of growth to where, Kerry Carpenter played 87 games.
Yeah.
He only had 300. He had 296 official plate appearances in the regular season and did what he did. It was 18 homers, 16 doubles at a 930 OPS. That's a joke. If you can keep him on the field for 100, 115 games, just think about that. 120 games. Think about that production.
First of all, we worry about Riley Green getting hurt. Riley Green, he played 130 some games this year. He had 500 some at bats. They did a pretty cagey job of keeping him healthy, and they learned a few things at the same time. I don't think you'll see Riley Green playing center field again. So, these are the things that for 2025 are kind of interesting. I'll give you a comp for Riley Green. We don't have to talk about it now, but I watched Brandon Nimmo play for the Mets, and you can love him or you can hate him, but the floor for Riley is kind of what Brandon Nimmo does for the Mets. I think he has a higher ceiling, but Brandon Nimmo's a pretty damn good player, by the way. So there's a lot of similarities here. A lot of people like to throw out the Grady Sizemore comp, and so do I, but Riley's going to have to get better if he's Grady Sizemore, right? Grady Sizemore was healthy, one of the 5 best players in baseball, probably.
Grady Sizemore was a monster. And I'm not saying Riley can't be that, but it's a different skill set. There was stolen bases. It was different. But Riley Green could be a monster in a different way. I don't think that I'm definitely not going to put a ceiling on Riley at this point of his career, but But it's interesting. You're right. But this is, he's a Brandon Nimmo's really good player. I think he gets overlooked because he's not a Yankee. He's in New York, and he's not he's not a showy guy, but he's kind of a dog out there.
Yeah, he's solid. All right, so let's break down a few places in 2025. So finish the season with essentially 2 starters, almost 1.5 starters. And we can debate. I mean, Olson is obviously the second starter. Cater Montero was the second starter for a lot of the last 8 weeks of the season. But let's look at the rotation. The way they're going to pitch next year, and I think Scott addressed this yesterday. Both AJ and Scott addressed it. Their plan is to go into the season next year with 5 starters. So give me your take on what it was and what it likely will be next year, rotation-wise.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So obviously you've got Skubal at the top. He's going to win a Cy Young. He won the American League Triple Crown. He's a horse. He's okay. Boom. Just move on. I think Reese Olson's going to establish himself as at least in this current rotation as it stands right now, the solid number 2. Or if you go get a guy, a more frontline guy, and you really back the truck up, you can go get a guy and he slots in behind Skubal, and Reese Olson ends up at worst for number 3. Completely fine with that. He is when he's right and he's healthy. I love his stuff. He is not afraid of the zone. He's got weapons to get you out in zone. He can make you chase when he executes pitches. Completely fine with what we have in Reese Olson. I'm not going to sleep on Cater Montero. I like the weapons. Does he have to refine the strike throwing a little bit? Yes. Is he going to have to figure something out when that slider isn't there for him on a given day? Yes. I think he's capable of doing that. This is a sharp young man. Just don't, you don't hear a lot from him because his English isn't as strong as he'd like it to be. But he's a smart kid, and the elevator goes to the top, and it goes to the top quickly. I've had several conversations with him, and there's some very insightful answers when you ask him questions. So he will be better next year too. He's probably more 4 or 5 back end. I think what happens with Casey Mize is going to be a very interesting conversation. Just getting him through a season healthy is really job one. But there's some things with Mize that are that you can work with. He's got, we saw 96, 97, 98 out of his fastball. We saw a dynamic split at times. Can you get that to be more consistent? And can he hold innings? That's a huge piece of the puzzle. Look at some guys that are hurt. What is Matt Manning? He went down this year. He was supposed to be part of the depth equation. What is he? How does he fit in? What does he look like when he comes back? That's a massive piece. We can keep going down the pecking order if you want, but like the bottom line is that if I'm looking at those 3 guys we know are healthy and able right now, with Skubal being a clear number 1, in my eyes, Reese Olson being a solid number 2 or number 3, depending on what you go do in the offseason. And then you have Cater Montero. I think Cater Montero, like I said, is if at worst he is a 5/swing guy in the bullpen, I'm fine with that. Now, if you can do better and you find some players in free agency, or I'm forgetting Jackson Jobe. I mean, I'm not just pushing Jackson Jobe to the bullpen right now. Jackson Jobe is absolutely in that mix too. So I think that's a good start. I do think you need to do some business, in the free agent market and see what that looks like.
All right. So let's ask a few questions here. First of all, I love Cater Montero. Cater Montero is a dog. He not afraid. Got better. I love guys that get better. I love it when you can just actually see them getting better. And 100%. There was a pitch I saw him really start to get people out with, and it really evolved in the last 2 months of the season. And that was Cater Montero's changeup. The slider is big for him. The fastball command is huge. His fastball command weirdly reminds me of how Reese Olson gained fastball command, and it pretty much set up all the rest of his breaking stuff, which is what he uses to get people out. But when Reese Olson gained fastball command, everything else really took off for him. And Cater Montero, as he gained fastball command, made all his other stuff work. But that changeup that was really dropping in, some of the last 4 or 5 outings was a real out pitch for him. And if it continues to progress, I think people are sleeping on how good he can be, because he seems like he has the capacity to throw innings. So he could be a 140, 150 inning guy. And those are, getting more unusual as every season goes by in the major leagues. So
Huge.
So let's talk a little bit about Joe, because it was a really interesting thing that both he was rostered and just how hitters responded to his stuff. I don't think we saw anything close to vintage Jackson Jobe in these games.
No.
And I'm not even saying he was nervous. What we saw was how good his stuff was. And also what we saw was how inconsistent he is at executing his pitches on it, from pitch to pitch. And
Right.
I think he's going to need to be in that Fetter, Lund, Nieves pitching lab for a little while, but he needs to be able to be in games, work innings, and gain some experience to be able to repeat his stuff and polish his stuff, So, but would you expect that he will break camp next year as part of the rotation?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think you give him a chance to compete for it in spring training. And I think that there's certain guys. Look, the reality of the situation is you go through off season. By the time you quote unquote finish your off season, which never really finishes, but there's definitely stages to it. 85% of your decisions are made when you are in camp midway through camp. You know what you're going to do. Injuries, horrendous performances, incredible performances do have some influence, but the majority of your roster, you know what you're going north with. That's just how it works. Tigers are not exclusive to that. This is across the industry. And maybe that's a sliding scale somewhere between 80 and 90, depending on where you are as a baseball team or as an organization. I think he's one of those where next spring training is going to matter. He's going to have to throw the ball over the plate. He's going to have to show the ability to carry some innings. Even in spring training, I think he's going to have to be able to show the ability to execute some pitches and have some fastball command. Because as we know, first of all, I think the young man was given his opportunity in a situation that was unbelievable. And the reason he got the opportunity is because he's got real big league weapons at his disposal. And with him and with a lot of young pitchers, it's just about throwing it over the plate. And it was spotty. We know that. We saw that. But boy, what you saw, there's big upside there. So I think his offseason is going to be really important for him. And I think his spring training for him, this is different for each player, but for him, I think his spring training is going to be very important. He's probably going to get run out there in front of a lot of A teams, like early in games, and he may go on the road a lot because you're trying to see how he reacts. You're trying to see, how he reacts he's going to go to Tampa when the Yankees are running their A team out there, like those kind of things. Like that's the kind of things you can to a certain degree, you can engineer that in spring training. So, I think his spring training is going to be important for him. So can I see him breaking camp? I can't. Can I see him also going back to AAA for a little bit of extra seasoning to get his sea legs under him and get a good start to 2025? I can see that as well.
All right, I'm going to ask you something as a hitter. Jackson Jobe has a lot of swing and miss stuff, to say the least. What I found really interesting in the two outings was there wasn't a lot of swing and miss at Jackson Jobe, at least in the playoff outings. There will be, but there was not. And I'm just I find it monstrously beneficial to him and their capacity in Fetters and all the pitching guys' capacity to now have a teaching tool for him to say, hey, look, you understand the difference now between minor league hitters and major league hitters? Yeah. Major league hitters didn't miss your stuff. Major league hitters, they weren't missing your stuff too much. They will, but let's discuss how that's going to happen now. And I think of anything that happened with Jackson Jobe, that one single facet of exposure will prove to be unbelievably beneficial to, his growth as a player, and it'll be a huge player development part of what makes him good, especially next year, because he's never had guys put him in play as consistently as easily as they put him in play in those outings. So I'll be curious to see how they navigate. Right. I'll be curious to see how they navigate that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's you have guys. He's got special stuff, right? And we know, Dad was a professional golfer. He's been in the cauldron before. You know, and I'm not saying that just transfers over genetically, but he's seen it, right? He's seen how that operates. So now, you know, you're him sitting in off season like, okay, I got good stuff. My stuff plays at the big league level. I got to get better. And like you said, it's the Feder, Lund, Nieves pitching room, and those guys are going to get him better. Like this is the thing with failure, and he didn't fail. Let's just clear that up right now. But this is the thing with struggle, that if you get over the emotion of it, boy, there's lessons in it. And I think this kid's uniquely situated to get in to understand the struggle and then also learn from it and move forward. So that's what makes you really excited about what he brings to the table.
Yeah, it's interesting, whether it's, you know, business, any sport you play, pretty much anything. When you're really talented, a guitar player, I don't care what it is. If you're really talented, the first time you're in a room with people like you who are equally as talented, it's like, everybody can do what I can do now. Okay. I'm not the most talented guy in the room anymore. And how you navigate that and how you embrace it and how you makes you realize what you need to get better about, that usually defines how good you're going to be. Some guys embrace it. Yeah. Some guys struggle with it. You know, I get the feeling he'll be great with it, but you know, I think people's expectations that he was going to walk out there and just start firing bullets and not be touched. Yeah, some guys do that. It's pretty rare, but I want to remind everybody, I think Tarek Skubal gave up 37 homers a couple of years ago. I mean, it just doesn't happen overnight. It's typically a process. And I think what Jackson Joe found out this last month of the season will help him a ton this offseason going into next year. So, which is entirely, you know, part of the point of why they brought him up, besides the fact they thought he could get him a few outs, but the exposure was really the point. So, all right. Last question is question one of the big two, which is what players were most impacted by the way by the playoffs, both in a positive and negative way? We just touched on Jackson Joe, but tell me some other players you think the playoffs impacted both in a good or a bad way.
I would say, I'm telling you, I'm high on this guy. I think Wenzel Perez. Was highly impacted, I think, in a positive way. And the reason why is I think he was really good all year long. Doesn't get as much ink as some of the other guys. But boy, and I think I even tweeted this out. He doesn't always get hits in those big at-bats, but the quality of his at-bats consistently when it's hot and when it's late and when it's close, right or left-handed, it's impressive. Everybody goes back to Carpenter getting the big 3-run swing off Clase. Okay, then Trey Sweeney before him muscles that ball in the right field. Jake Rogers hits the ball past Roquio at short. But everybody's forgetting about the play Quan made on the line drive off Wenzel Perez's bat, and then the at-bat that in which that happened. And so that was the heater. It was a cutter up, and he puts a great swing, stays inside that ball, and hammers it to Quan left field. Quan makes an unbelievable catch. So, like, for me, he's a guy that I really expect to go to another level based on his performance in 2024 in the regular season, but what he was able to do in the postseason as well.
Anybody that, you know, follows me at all knows I have a lot of love for Wenzel Perez. I mean, what a rise to the occasion player. And when you look at how Parker Meadows and Wenzel Perez played, that's two gangsters, man.
Meadows
I mean, that is, woo, man. And they can both do a lot of things. They can hit the ball over the fence once in a while. They can play, you know, I mean, Perez, I expect his defense to improve next year, and I actually expect him to be the backup center fielder next year also. You know, but his at-bats are so good, and he can run. You know, he and Meadows both can steal bases, and they just are rise to the occasion players, and hopefully that will continue next year. But I think there's a lot of ceiling left in that tank. I mean, he's the kind of player I first want to give a high five to and then give him a hug. I mean, holy smokes, he was a lot of fun. How about Bo Brisky?
Oh, wow, yeah. I mean, yeah, from the, you know, here I go skewing positions. I'm a position player. Here I go skewing player. Yeah. Now, Brisky was phenomenal. And in his emergence, and again, we've said this ad nauseum. AJ doesn't like to name closers or setup man or this, that, and the other. But he always tells you, my actions will tell you where I'm at. Well, all I know is that Bo Brisky came out of the pen a lot when it was late, when it was close, or he opened in the pitching chaos. He opened in the pitching chaos when the top of that lineup was a good matchup for him. And boy, he was good in every single role that AJ gave him this year. So 100%, I think Bo Brisky is ready in 25 to go to another level.
I think another guy I want to give a shout out to who just showed you he also is just so important to, Tiger baseball winning baseball games. And that's Jake Rogers. Holy smokes, was Jakey Rogers good in the playoffs. It added a few knocks, called great games. I did not see Dylan Dingler play one single inning in the playoffs. Did you?
He didn't.
Obviously he did. But, Jakey was really, really good.
He was fantastic. He was very good. I mean, I don't know. Very, very, very rarely. First of all, I don't know that we have a pitcher on the staff. I say we, the Tigers have a pitcher on the staff that carries a pitch comm on them. You have some guys that call their own pitches out there, or, they'll shake and they'll hit a button. And here's where I'm going with this. Jake Rogers pushes a button, they throw the pitch. And I know it's been a little bit of a journey to get there for him, because I know that, that him and AJ, there was a lot of sessions on pitch calling and when you should do this and when you should do that, this, that, and the other. But it looks like guys have complete and total trust, because I can't remember, at least in some of the games I've done and some of the games where, if I wasn't doing it, I was watching on TV or whatever. I don't see a lot of shaking going on out there. You don't necessarily see guys shake off and ask for something else. So I think he's been tremendous in his growth behind the plate. And then, like you said, some of the things he brought in offensively has been awesome as well.
Yeah, such an integral part of their winning and their culture. All right, we're going to take a break before we get to question 2 of the big 2. We'll be back in 60. All right, we're back. Question 2 of the big 2. What do we really get out of the Harris-Hinch press conference? I know you didn't get to see all of it, but you got the crux of it. I'm going to ask you a few questions that are kind of rapid fire. We'll do a Bobby Scales II rapid fire with that. Okay. So with what we got out of the press conference, first name for 2025, Spencer Torkelson. Thoughts?
Take the last probably few at bats of the postseason, have a hard look at them, figure out how you can do that. His swing was much shorter, and he had some tremendous at bats off the nasty guys in that Guardian bullpen. He's capable of doing that. This offseason is big for him. There's got to be, I think there's some changes he's going to have to make sure that he's a productive major league player. I will say this, the defense, I don't exactly know how it graded out, metrically. We know that the analytics struggle a little bit with the defense, but the my eyeball test tells me he made huge strides defensively, and he was very good specifically on picks, which helps the rest of your infield with more confidence. They can make more plays. So I'm not giving up on Torque. I think there's a productive major leaguer in there, but there needs to be some significant changes made to his approach.
Those were the exact words of one Scott Harris yesterday. That was exactly what was said. So a player development guy for a long time, Bobby Scales, which is what you were, the Pobo had exactly the same take on it that you did. So that just shows you a player development game, right there. So I will say, if you would have asked me in a lottery, Cade Smith probably had the nastiest swing and miss stuff I saw this year in Major League Baseball. Nobody got more swings and misses on his fastball than Cade Smith. And who took him off the wall in center field? I mean, I did not have Spencer Torkelson in that lottery. So God bless the young man for doing that, because there was a point in time it felt like Cade Smith had struck out like 9 out of 10 guys, and Torque took him off the wall. All right, Casey Mize, thoughts?
Chase Health, quite frankly. He's had broken service time each of the last, he's missed a lot of time in a Tiger uniform. There are big league weapons there. The guy was a first-round pick. I think that when you have a talent like him, and he's talented, you've seen flashes of really good. How can you get more out of that more consistently? I think that's the biggest question.
I have some Casey Mize worries, and here's what some of my concerns are. Casey Mize, in modern pitching vernacular, understanding how to use technology, pitch shapes, pitching aptitude, is pretty off the charts if people don't know that. He may be the most fluent, maybe aside from, Skubal and him are probably pretty close for being in tune to the shapes and styles of their pitches on that staff. What concerns me a lot about Casey Mize is he struggles to execute them like Tarik Skubal can. Tarik Skubal can execute his pitches. Casey Mize, it's very difficult to pitch when you don't have a style. And it's very difficult to have a style when you don't have, at least average caliber major league command. And Casey Mize's command, which was supposedly so good, is really not very good. He's got kind of average fastball command, which is not good because his fastball suddenly is pretty damn good. Down in the zone, it's not very good at all. It's real hittable. His split, which was his signature pitch coming out of Auburn, and I've talked with this, with various people, is trash. It's garbage. It's not an out pitch. And the weirdest thing happened in one of the last starts of the year. I can be much meaner than Bobby can be, by the way. Then it is.
I'm not going to put trash on it. I'm not going to put trash on it. And he's, go ahead. I'll let you finish. Go ahead.
There was a game, you'll remember it, that Jakey Rogers called for 8 splits in an inning near the end of the year. It's like the second or third start to the end of the season, and he threw
Kansas City
splits.
I did that game.
I don't remember who we were playing, and the split was just chef's kiss. It was going straight down. Sometimes it was tailing a little bit arm side, but the vert was really good, and I was like, he's got it. He's tweaked it. He can throw it, and sure enough, he got knocked out the next inning. By the way, and the next start, nothing. Right back to the same inconsistent, never knew what the pitch was going to do. And you're 5 years into this now. This isn't like last season. I've been gone for 2 years. It looks exactly like it looked before Tommy John. The real concern besides that is his slider in 2021 was good. It's not good now. And, so you start asking yourself, Casey Mize needs another pitch that people swing and miss at. I mean, they don't, and if he's not going to get that, he's not going to be very good. Period. End of story. Health or no health. I mean, if you can't,
Mark, I think the health has a lot to do with it. I mean, if you just look back, I mean, I'm not even doing a deep dive right now, but you look back 2021, he's 24 years old. He made 30 starts.
Yeah, he was good.
150 innings. That's fantastic. I mean, at 24, you're supposed to be a guy, you're a first round pick, all the things that come with it. Sure, the Tigers weren't very good. He was 7-9 with a 371 and a 471 FIP. But more importantly for me is a 1.13 walks whip. That means he had below average traffic on the bases throughout his entire start. Now, the thing that's a little scary in a starting pitcher, only 7K per 9. Right. So he's not striking out a bunch of guys, never has. Then the injury start, he's got 2 starts in 22 and then proceeds to miss pretty much all of 22, all of 23. And the biggest thing you needed Casey Mize to do this year is get through the year healthy and post anywhere from 25 to 28 starts. And that didn't happen. Missed significant pieces of time. And so while you're still waiting on the case, you're waiting on Casey Mize to get back to a point where he can take what he did in 21 and go to the next level. Because again, 7-9 with 371, 150 innings pitched for a guy who's in his first full season in the big leagues, you will take that. So I don't know. He's never been able to build. I mean, he missed all of his age 25. I say he missed all of his main league 25 season and all of his age 26 season. And so it's difficult. It's difficult when you miss that kind of time, basically almost 2 years to the day. I think when he made his last start in 22 to this first start in 24, and then you have another injury shortened season when you're trying to regain that. You're right. You talked about a style. Casey Mize does have to figure out a pitching identity. You can't do it when you're not on the mound consistently. And so, 102 in the third innings this year, I mean, that's okay, but he still missed a significant piece of time. And so I just don't know that we know what he is going to be. I think he's still searching internally about who he is and what he can be.
Wouldn't be shocked to see Casey Mize included in a trade package if they make a deal. I just wouldn't. I think he is, everybody wears out their welcome at some point, and I don't think it's lost on, how long he's been here, and we're still searching for an identity. That's not a good thing. So, all right. Interesting name, contributed a lot. I think we gloss over some of the shortcomings, but got to tip your hat to the guy. But I'm curious what you think of for next year, Trey Sweeney.
I like Trey Sweeney. I like the bat. I like how the steadiness at shortstop. I saw him. I saw his build. I saw how he goes about it. It's not flashy. It's unassuming. And I put a Jordy Mercer comp on him defensively. Jordy Mercer is a good major league shortstop for a while. He was not flashy, but if you hit it to 10 at shortstop, you're probably out. And I had a chance to work with Jordy Mercer when I was field coordinator with the Pirates in 18 and 19 before I think he got traded to Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe he finished his career in Detroit. But Jordy Mercer was a very serviceable major league shortstop on Pirates teams 13, 14, 15 that made playoff runs. I could see that happening for Trey Sweeney. I could. It's a whole different offensive profile. So that's two different profiles. But the defensive profile, I see that for Trey Sweeney. So I think there's upside there.
I watched Trey Sweeney hit, and it reminds me of one of the mentors that taught me a lot about hitting, which, ex-Tiger hitting coach and bench coach, Bruce Fields. And when I talk hitting with Bruce and his son, Aaron, what Bruce used to tell me, he used to go, Mark, here's what you got to understand about major league hitters. If you're even a decent major league hitters do not miss mistakes, okay? And they do damage on mistakes. That's when you know a guy's a pretty decent hitter. Trey Sweeney, the one thing I like about him, Trey Sweeney will do some damage on mistakes. He can hit the ball out of the ballpark. Now, is he going to hit 270 in the major leagues? Probably not. Can he hit 240 with 16 bombs? Yeah, maybe. Need to see him walk a little more. The other thing I like about him, not the most range, but at the same time, if you hit the ball to him, you're out. So a pretty serviceable shortstop until either McGonigal or Rayner or somebody else comes in and replaces him. And it brings us to the Javi Baez question, which is Bobby Scales has taught me that you cannot fight age as an athlete. And it brings me to this question. It's undefeated. Okay. And as much as you like to think there's exceptions, and there are exceptions, okay, but at a position like shortstop and a guy that has the torque in his swing that Javi Baez does, it may be time to start saying, what if the body just can't support playing the way he used to play? So the question I have for you is, even after surgery, you're about 1,000 at bats now into, pretty below average performance. So the question becomes, what is Javi Baez? And, how are we going to know what Javi Baez is? So share that with me.
Mark, I don't know. And it's, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, but the reality of the situation is this, throughout the season, you don't have as much access to the health of players. And what I mean by, you don't know exactly what Javi was dealing with last year. When I say last year, I say 24. Okay. How bad was the back? How bad were the hips? You don't know. Right. And if they're quote unquote fixed and you've got quote unquote a healthy off season, what is that going to look like moving forward? Listen, at the end of the day, you knew there was going to be some pain on the back end of this contract, but you had to get the player. Alavila had to get the player, so he went where he needed to go. You know there's going to be pain on the backside of it. And let's be honest, this is not just him. This is a lot of GMs. This is how this thing works. You sign the play. You want the player. You sign the player. You know the backside of the contract is going to be ugly. We lived through it with Miguel. How bad is it going to be? You don't know, but you need to get the player for the run you're trying to make. And some of this you're just going to have to deal with. Now, I don't know that people thought it was going to be as tough on Javi as at this stage, this early, as it's proven to be. But, these guys have basically said he's going to be, he's coming to camp. He's going to be part of the mix. And the question is, what can you get out of him at this stage if he's healthy? That's the question. And you're not going to know until you get him back to Lakeland, till you get him in a uniform and you see what it looks like in spring training.
Not only, I have a little more, I think the bar is going to even be higher than that because, look, there's sometimes you just really can't tell too much from spring training. I mean, you can tell some basic things, but right, you're not really seeing sequences. You're not seeing premium velocity. So it would not shock me if Javi Baez had to go on a rehab assignment rather than breaking camp with the Tigers. They may want to see 2 weeks in AAA against real regular season AAA pitching before they can make some type of decision on how healthy or what he's able to or not to do. It wouldn't shock me if that's the way it worked out for him. But Javi Baez is coming to camp. They're going to find out. I mean, they're just not. I mean, everybody, I think, easily thought that he was just going to get bought out, DFA'd, and bye-bye. And that may happen. It absolutely might happen. I just don't think it's going to happen during the winter. I think it'll happen next spring or even into the season before that happens. All right, I got a favorite topic. You and I have talked about this, not on the pod, but let's talk about Justin Henry Malloy for a second, because you had some interesting things to say to me, and we talked about hitting aptitude. And do you want to talk about a guy who surprised me in a good way about a lot of things, who I have weirdly now, eager to see what it turns into? It's Justin Henry Malloy. And then I want to talk to you about the idea of how do you not give him a first baseman's glove and, try to see if he can add that into his level of versatility to get on the field. So tell me some Justin Henry Malloy thoughts.
Oh, I think this young man has a tremendous upside. Tremendous upside. He showed his propensity to hit left-handed pitching. I think with some adjustments to his approach and some tweaks, he could hit right-handed pitching. He has a tremendous eye at the plate. He always has. You go back to like his collegiate stats. I mean, his ability to make the right decisions on pitches is very good. I think what he ran into, he came up, got hot, and then had a really cold spell where, quite frankly, I thought he was headed back to Toledo, and eventually went back when some other roster moves got back. But I thought he was headed back earlier than that. It was too much pull. He was trying to pull. I think he came to the big leagues with the idea thinking he had to prove himself by hitting homers to stay up here. And he ran into a few, but that approach got him in trouble, especially with fastballs away and spin away. And so he became very pitchable, and he struck out a ton. But, he figured out after, obviously some conversation with the hitting group, and I think some other conversations that were had, he needed to stay in the middle of the field, change his approach, and he did that. And then what you saw at the end of the year was his ability to really wear out right. He wore out right field. Mm-hmm. And talk about aptitude. Just this kid has a presence, man. This kid, I mean, he's going to do whatever he wants to after he plays however long he wants to play in the big leagues, whether stay in baseball and be a GM, whether it's go in business and run a business, whatever he wants to do. He's that level of intelligent. He has that level of presence about him. And I always say it, you've got aptitude, you've got athletic ability, and you've got adaptability. If you've got enough aptitude and you've got enough athletic ability, you can adapt to whatever you're being asked to do. He's got all three of those A's. And so his ability to make the adjustments in the box and do what he's able to do there is tremendous. Now, to your point about first base, sure, why not? Go get your first base glove this offseason, go to first base and have somebody wear you out at your local field, wherever he lives in the off season and wherever he works out.
He played third base, Bobby.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
You would think
why not? Why not go over there?
Right. What's the downside?
None. There's none. There's no downside. I've seen guys do it. And this is funny. We're not talking about this young man now, but Bly Madris was a guy that I had in Pittsburgh, and he was all outfield when he got to Pittsburgh. And then one day he walks out of the clubhouse in spring training and he had a first base glove on. And he was like, well, I'm going to go over here. There's opportunity here. I'm going to play first base. And here you go. Fast forward all those years later. He got some games over at first base for the Tigers this year. So certainly if a guy like Bly Madris, who had never played infield in his life, is able to learn how to play a serviceable first base and end up in the big leagues, helping a team get to this stage, why can't Justin Henry Malloy do the same thing? I mean, there's no reason he can't. So yeah, give him a first base glove, go wear yourself out in the off season and go to work and see what it looks like.
All right. So before I get you out of here, it was a big year for Bobby Scales doing games this year. How many games did you do this year? Close over 100?
I think I was close to 80.
It, right?
No, it wasn't over 100. It was closer. It was in between 80 and 85, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
So how was your season? That's what I think everybody wants to know. I mean, doing 80 Major League Baseball games and traveling around the country, how was that for you? It's the first time you ever did that many. And did you have a good time? Yeah. How was it?
Oh, my God. Are you kidding me? I had a great time. I worked with Dan Dickerson, obviously, for the most part. Greg Gagne came up from AA when Dan moved over to TV to fill in for Benetti when he had some national responsibilities. So, I mean, between working with Dan, who's obviously a legend, and then Greg, who has a very different style than Dan, but that's fine. Got on well with everybody. Andy Dirks, who I didn't work with, it was either usually me or him, or when Dirks, he was doing TV, we would be in the same space from time to time. He's awesome. Just fun to work with. Good dude. Daniela Bruce. I mean, just everybody, all of our engineers and producers. It was fantastic. It was a great experience. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. You learn every day. You have the opportunity to have conversations with, people who are in the mix of a big league organization, big league team every single day. It was awesome. I mean, you can't ask for any better. I got to give a shout to my son, Trey, because Dad was on the road a lot, but he handled it like a champ. I was able to come up to Detroit twice and sit in the booth and see what Dad did for a living. And he's not a baseball kid, but that's okay. As long as he's okay with it, I'm going to keep rolling. And I got to give a special shout to his mom. We are no longer married, but she, if she doesn't take a lot of that, I wouldn't be able to do it. So I can't even hate. So it was a tremendous year in 2024 for me.
Well, I think everybody loved the job you did. You obviously ingrained into the Detroit Tiger baseball family now, to say the least. Obviously, de facto third member of Days of Roar Pod. Can't thank you enough for always being willing to come on and replace world traveler Evan Petzold. I think the person that should be thanking you should be Savannah Petzold, because, if Av, he's worried about how the pod's going to go without him here. And, he feels much better when he knows that Bobby Scales II is, sitting in for him. He gets a comfort level. All right, we're going to get you out of here, Bobby. Can't thank you enough. We're going to take a break. When we come back, world traveler Evan Petzold. We're back with my favorite part of the show. Where, oh, where is Evan San Diego? And look at him. He looks so refreshed. He looks so guilt-free now that the Tigers have been eliminated. He looks like he's coming home in 2 days. But I just need to know, Ev, how has 17 different locations in Greece been treating you? Did you put on like 11 pounds? And, are you ready to, get back into the baseball thing?
So before I even talk about my trip, I just want to say shout out to you and shout out to Bobby for keeping this podcast going, taking care of business while I've been gone. Much appreciated. Like, you guys are the best. You guys are rock stars. Robin Chan, you're awesome as well. Thank you for keeping this thing going. And it's not 17 different locations. It's just 4: Athens, Santorini, Milos, and in Crete right now. I'm in Crete. So it's the largest and most populous Greek island, third and final island on our trip. or Santorini first, then Milos, now Crete. It's been an amazing trip. I celebrated my 26th birthday in Milos. It was beautiful. But yeah, like I'm ready to come home. Like it's time to come back to the United States, to get home. And also to get back to work. Like there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on. We have a lot of catching up to do, and we're going to be able to catch up, for months to come, right? Because we got a long ways to go until we get to spring training. We have so much to dig into. But yeah, man, the food's good. The beaches are great. Savannah and I, we are enjoying this. We are soaking it all in. It was tough to see, the Tigers obviously lose. We watched that game, especially as it got towards the end. And, we were kind of watching a show on Netflix. It was late at night at that point. We were watching a show on Netflix as we were getting ready to go to bed, and also watching, what was going on with the Tigers. And we're kind of popping back and forth. And man, when Lane Thomas hit that home run, we were both like, holy crap. Like nobody saw that coming. I mean, Lane Thomas jumping a first pitch from Tarek Skubal, taking him deep for a grand slam, especially like right after, Tarek Skubal hits Jose Ramirez with the pitch, brings home the tying run, and then Lane Thomas steps up to the plate and gets the job done. Like you just don't see that, especially against Tarek Skubal, a guy who has been so good and has been able to maneuver around so many jams all season long. Like anytime he's gotten into trouble, it seems like he's gotten out of it. And, this one time, like not able to get out of it. And that ends up being the Tigers' downfall. So that was tough to see. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about. I mean, Scott Harris and A.J. Hinch had their end of season meeting. I got keyed in on a couple of things that were talked about there. And yeah, man, it's just like a busy time of year with the season ending now and getting into the off season. There's only going to be more storylines ahead. So a lot to talk about for months to come, but excited to get back home, no doubt.
To emphasize what you just said, a couple innings prior to the jam where Lane went salami, he had been in a bases loaded or in a pretty big jam, and he basically threw 5 pitches and disposed of people. It was just ridiculous. He just dispatched them with 2 strikeouts and got out of the inning. So I think we're spoiled by how great Tarek Skubal has been this year and how easily he's extricated himself from jams. Hat tip to Lane Thomas, because it wasn't like he hit a cookie. As bottom rail, I think I said this to Bobby. I mean, you got to tip your hat to Cleveland. They hit 2 bombs to win games. Nobody handed them the games. They took them. So I'm sure that's a rivalry that'll get a lot of play next year, and the season's over. Now it's getting time to do a postmortem, and then starting next week when you're home, we'll start talking about what they can do, maybe to improve the squad, and who's going to be back, who's not, what they may do. And, Evan Petzold and Mark Gorash love doing that in the out season. We're pretty good at it. If they would have listened to us a little more closely, things might have gone a little better earlier. However, let's talk about your impressions of what you heard about at the Harris-Hinch final presser. And I want to emphasize, and I said this a little earlier, and it was kind of heartwarming in a good way from a baseball standpoint for me. I don't think I've ever seen Hinch and Harris be more united and on the same page, where they had seemingly developed some next level chemistry they may have not had prior to the last 70 days of the season. So I want to share that with you, whether you could tell or not, or how much you've been able to get over on the other side of the world, 5,132 miles away. But, give me your impressions about what you heard and what you saw.
Well, any type of chemistry between A.J. Hinch and Scott Harris is not surprising at all. I mean, this is a team that went 86 and 76 and went to the playoffs and won a playoff series. I mean, look, if Al Avila was the GM and A.J. Hinch was there and they did this, like those two guys would be, bro hugging it up like crazy. There's no doubt about it. So, when you make a run like this and you go into the playoffs, there's immediate chemistry. It's the same in the clubhouse. Like you're on a good team, there's chemistry. There's good chemistry. Okay. You're on a bad team, it's not great vibes. Like you go back and you look at, what the Tigers had in 2022 when everything went downhill right after they signed Javier Baez and Eduardo Rodriguez, right? Like there were some great guys in that clubhouse, no doubt about it. Like there were some great human beings, a lot of guys, some of which who are on this team now, specifically some of the pitchers. And like, the chemistry was bad. Like it was just like the vibes were not good at all. So of course the vibes are great. Of course the vibes are great for the team. Of course the vibes are great for A.J. Hinch and Scott Harris. Like that doesn't surprise me at all, especially when you consider what this team has been able to do. But the takeaways from what was actually said, some things that stood out, like Javier Baez having a role on the 2025 team, that's not surprising at all. We've already talked about that. A platoon with Trey Sweeney, it just makes so much sense. It's always been the plan. Basically, Javier Baez will play against left-handed pitchers, and Sweeney will play against right-handed pitchers. So Sweeney gets most of the playing time anyway. Don't worry about it. Like, people that are going to stress out that Javier Baez is going to unseat Trey Sweeney, that's not even close to the case. A platoon where Javier Baez is barely playing, barely getting starts, it's a lot different than like an even timeshare. Like, that's not what we're talking about. So Trey Sweeney going to get most of the playing time. Javi only starting against left-handed starters, coming off the bench as a pinch hitter against left-handed relievers. You can kiss the Willy Adames dreams goodbye, it seems, if Javier Baez will indeed have a role on this team. That's going to be the case. So yes, he has to come back. He has to come back healthy. He has to show up in spring training. But like, the plan is for him to be a part of the 2025 Detroit Tigers in a platoon role with Trey Sweeney, still with Sweeney getting more of the playing time because he's the left-hander, that's going to face all those right-handed pitchers. And Trey Sweeney has held his own against left-handed pitchers as well. Let's not forget. So that's kind of how it looks to me. It makes a lot of sense. We've talked about it before. That wasn't surprising. Spencer Torkelson needing to have a good offseason. Everyone knows what that means. So I don't really understand why we have to sugarcoat it like that. Like, of course, he needs to have a good offseason. Everyone does. The pressure is on for Spencer Torkelson, so let's just say it. Like, let's not dance around the truth with talking about how this guy needs to have a good offseason. Like, I don't like the way that sounded, just because it seems like they've already given up on him, even though I know they're going to say that they have confidence in him and they believe in him and they want him to become a well-rounded hitter. They've been saying that for 2 years, Mark. Like, they've been saying they want Spencer Torkelson to become a complete hitter now for 2-3 years. And if time's up, just say time's up and we're going to explore some other options. Like, I'm okay hearing that. And I don't think that takes away from Torkelson at all. Like, I think that, maybe further motivates him. I understand you dangle the carrot of you need to have a good offseason. I get it. I understand what you're trying to do. But at the same time, like, everybody is very aware that Spencer Torkelson is not the answer for the Tigers at first base. So maybe we just talk about it a little bit more like that, as opposed to talking about it like, hey, if he just has a really good offseason and comes to spring training and he rakes in spring training, well, no, then you're talking about a Carlos Santana contingency plan. Like, are we really going that route, or are we going to go the Christian Walker route, get a little bit aggressive and try to get a real bat that's going to be able to be at first base? Because you can play the game of like, Torkelson needs to have a good offseason, sign Carlos Santana to like a really cheap deal, bring them both to spring training and just like see how it goes, knowing that maybe you take Santana, but if Torkelson rakes, maybe you go that route and you cut ties early in spring training and you're really not eating that much money on a cheap Carlos Santana deal. Like, I don't love the idea of that. I think it's possible. I don't like the idea of that. I like going out and getting the established first baseman who's going to rake. Yeah, you're going to have to pay him a little bit, but Christian Walker is going to hit. That's my other takeaway, is that Spencer Torkelson needs to have a good offseason. Everybody needs to have a good offseason. Let's talk about what that really means. Let's be truthful about it, okay? Other thing, Kenta Maeda, no, he's not getting cut. Not yet. That's something that we've talked about. Mark, I know you feel like maybe he's thrown his last pitch as a Tiger. I understand why you feel that way. Just look at the numbers, look at the performance, look at what he's done. I am actually interested to see Kenta Maeda in a new offseason program, what he brings. And if it looks like garbage in spring, fine. Like, you can cut ties then, no doubt about it. Or you want to stick him in the bullpen to start the year, give him the Joey Wentz treatment. Okay, see how it goes for a little bit, and then you can cut ties, sure. But I'm interested to see Kenta Maeda on a new offseason program designed by Chris Fetter, Robin Lund, Juan Nieves, Scott Harris, A.J. Hinch, with all those guys in connection working together. I'm just interested to see what it looks like. So I am going to hold off on judging Kenta Maeda until I see him pitch in spring games. And if it's the 87, 88 mile an hour fastball in the first spring training start, I'm going to be concerned. If he's sitting 90, 91, I'm going to be feeling really good about Kenta Maeda moving forward. That's what I'm interested in seeing, is like, where's the fastball velo at on day one of spring training, or once we get into games and those games get going. That's going to tell me a lot about how I feel about him moving forward. I'm going to hold back on the judgments until then. I'm just interested to see, because I think that Chris Fetter's smart, Robin Lund is smart, Scott Harris is very smart, especially on the pitching side, and Juan Nieves does a good job as well. So let's see what they come up with coming into spring training. Another thing, Tarik Skubal. Yes, the Tigers should do everything they can to extend Skubal. But I think we all need to keep in mind that there are some long-term injury risks that I'm pretty sure the club is aware of. Actually, I'm positive the club is aware of. So regardless, Scott Harris did not say anything on that topic. He doesn't like to talk publicly about contract extensions. I understand. But let's not forget, this isn't Colt Keith. This is the best pitcher in the world. So if you want to lock him up, maybe just say you want to lock him up. I think that would, I think fans would take that a lot better. I mean, if you really want to lock up Tarik Skubal, I don't think you lose your bargaining chip by saying you want to lock up the best pitcher in the world. Like, who wouldn't want that guy, starting for you for years to come? But again, there are some injury concerns. And then the biggest takeaway was, right-handed hitter, adding a right-handed bat. I think that's the big question mark is like, who are they going to go out and get? Because they do need a right-handed hitter to offset the lefties. That could be an infielder. It could be an outfielder. If it's an infielder, it seems like it's probably going to be a first baseman, whether that's Christian Walker or Carlos Santana, maybe a third baseman and Alex Bregman if the Tigers feel like they're willing to pay that kind of money to go out and get Bregman. But when you think about the potential of adding a guy like Anthony Santander or Tyler O'Neill for, right-handed hitting corner outfielder, you move Matt Vierling to third base, keep him there, platoon him with Jace Young. You see what you got at third. You could add that big power bat in the outfield where you have so many left-handed hitting outfielders. To have a right-handed hitting outfielder, it just makes so much sense, especially when you can platoon Matt Vierling and Jace Young and see what you got at third base. I'm okay taking that route. And then you know what? At the trade deadline next year, like if that's not working out, you go out and you trade for a third baseman and you make your playoff push then. I like that idea a little bit better. So I'll be interested to see, is it going to be first baseman? Is it going to be corner outfielder? Is there a chance it could be Alex Bregman? We'll see. I think corner outfielder and or first baseman is more likely than third base at this point, but I can never count out an Alex Bregman, A.J. Hinch reunion. We'll see what kind of right-handed hitter the Tigers go out and get. Mark, those are my big takeaways. Like listening to the press conference, talking to people that were there, that's kind of what I gathered from this. And there's going to be more. There was a lot. There was a lot to dig into. And we're going to dig into more in the coming months. But those were kind of my immediate takeaways.
Casey Mize.
Yeah, man, like it's tough. Casey Mize is somebody that, is he a reliever? Is he a starter? Yeah, probably a starter if he can get the slider working, because the fastball was so good, especially early on in the season. The fastball was lively. And he did maintain the velocity even as the season went along. If he can just get the slider working, that's the biggest pitch for him. He needs a slider. If he doesn't have the slider, I just don't see how it works for him as a starter. I could see him out of the bullpen going fastball split. I like that out of the bullpen. I think that plays up. I would love to see Casey Mize in a 1-inning stint. Can he hit 100? I think he might be able to hit 100. He's hit 98 as a starter. So Casey Mize out of the bullpen throwing 100 with a splitter off of it, like there is a way in which that plays. Talk to Shelby Miller, right? Like Shelby Miller, he found success doing that with the Dodgers. Fastball split. I know he had the slider. And yes, Shelby Miller had his woes with the Tigers, but he was very successful in the short stint that he had with the Dodgers. So it's possible to make that work. I'd be interested to see, like, if Casey Mize cannot get the slider working, do the Tigers move him to the bullpen and say, hey, look, throw the fastball at 99, 100, throw the split off of it, and we'll use you situationally. I think that makes some sense, but we'll see what he comes to spring training with. If he has the good slider, anything's possible.
All right. Well, I just want to let you know, Nice Mark, who has been around for the last month, he will be going away. And Old Mark will be back next week. I have a few things to say about where we're going in the off season. Like I said, though, I did like a lot of what they had to say at the presser. I thought they also were not going to ruin what had gone on for the last 70 days in a press conference. They'll have a lot more to say in a month. We'll talk a lot more about the off season starting next week. And I will say this, Mize, Torkelson, Manning, all three will not be Tigers by next April. That's my opinion about what's up. Excited to get you back. We'll have lots of fun guests in the next couple of months between now and maybe Thanksgiving. People we had last year, people we love. We'll see if we can get them. We'll see if we can get Benetti again. We'll see if we can get Dan Dickerson on for his annual hour. And we'll get Farron back on. I'm excited to see what we can do. We had a great year. It's time to start thinking about 2025. All right. Please remember, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, the moon. I don't care where you listen to us, but listen to us. You can always find us in every Evan Petzold article at freep.com. I'd like to thank Nicole Avery Nichols. I'd like to thank Robin Chan, who has saved our ass so many times in the last 3 weeks as Evan travels the world like Christopher Columbus. And thank you for doing that, Robin, really. I'd like to thank Bobby Scales, who has just stepped up so huge and is really part of the Days of Horror pod. He's the best. Love to my grandson, the spectacular Braden Michael Gorash. Shout out to soon-to-be travel writer and food critic Savannah Petzold, and thanks for taking good care of Evan Petzold. And we're going to have a special segment with Savannah Petzold next week about the food in Greece. Till next week, peace.